following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Thank you, Tally Olson. We are back when the Jints and them bums played in New York along with the Yankees. I'm here with the two mavens of the Times, Noel Hynd and Alan Blumkin. Start with you, Alan. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm basically locked in because the weather is horrible here.
I certainly can imagine that. New York in early winter is everything I got away from to come to California.
Well, I was watching Red Zone on Sunday, with all the football games, and the game in Kansas City was played in a blizzard this past Sunday.
I
saw that. Yeah.
I can remember it being, maybe 6 in March, and Channel 9, the Yankees are playing an exhibition game in Fort Lauderdale. I'm 10 years old, and in the back of the production, they've got boats going by the stadium. And I'm thinking, this is February. I will not live in New York for my life. Something's got to get me out of here. All I can imagine then was Florida. California never even occurred to me at age 10. At age 11, it occurred to me when the Giants moved and the Dodgers moved to California. But I knew it was not going to be for me. No, Alan, I want you, before we get to Noel, I want you to talk about the book we talked about off air.
Okay, I'll make it fairly quick. Okay, when in 1989, when Field of Dreams opened, I didn't want to go because the Ray Liotta, Joe Jackson character batted with the wrong hand and threw with the wrong hand, and did not talk with a deep Southern accent with the real true Joe Jackson did. My brother and sister-in-law dragged me for my birthday that year to see it, and it blew me away. And I've seen it God knows how many times since, and every time they come to the end and Kevin Costner says to the father, "Let's have a catch." And so somebody posted something about this on Facebook a couple of weeks ago, and I put down, I said, I still choke up every time I see it. And there are people who can't go more than 2 weeks without watching it again. And I said, and I put down, people will come. And I got a like by Dwyer Brown, who played the father in that movie, who's a Facebook friend of mine. Several months ago, I got his book, If You Build It. It's a paperback, and he goes into the whole production of the movie and how it affected his life afterwards. And the book is a very, very easy read, and it's like $15 on Facebook, and it's well worth it.
Okay, now, was he involved in the production of it, or he just got the job as an extra?
He got the job, but he was on the set all the time.
Okay. So it gives an account of how the movie was made. That has to be interesting as hell.
Yeah.
Good. Noel, how are you doing this week?
Pretty good. Busy, as we discussed. Just a lot of end-of-the-year things. So I really I can't complain. I've had, a couple of cups of coffee, so I'm awake and ready for you. Anything you wanted to throw at me, I'm good for it.
Well, I'll throw something at you. You had a posting about something the other day. You have written 25 books?
I think so. I frankly don't know the count. And it gets a little murky because for example, Flowers from Berlin, which has probably sold more than any other, I wrote in 1986, But then when I republished it about 8 or 9 years ago, I gave it a pretty thorough rewrite. I cut a lot of things. I corrected things I didn't do as well the first time. And, of course, same with the Giants book. The second edition is a largely expanded edition. So do each of those titles count as 2 books or 1 book? When I do the 25 count, I'm sort of estimating that's about how many there are. And I won't even go into the fact that from about 1970 to 73, I wrote, what would be the nice word for it, erotic fiction under pseudonyms. I must have written like 60 books then. You'd write them, every 2 weeks or something like that. So there's a lot of titles out there, some that I admit to, and
it's difficult to write a book with one hand. It's difficult to write a book with one hand.
Yeah, exactly. And where do you do the research? And there's a lot going on.
It's very difficult. It's very difficult.
Yeah. Oh, that whole thing is that whole era is subject to another podcast and another discussion. But if you saw Boogie Nights,
show, let alone. Let me ask you about the books you wrote in your dad's name. Didn't you write some books with him as a cover or in conjunction
actually,
with him?
Those were mostly magazine articles. And the backstory on that was in 1968, he got an offer to do some new reports for a European wire service on true crime, and the pay was lousy. He didn't want to do it, and he was in his late 60s and kind of slowing down. So he kind of turned it over to me, and I wrote under his name. Subsequently, just a few years ago, I started to republish some of his collected works, and even though I did significant editing and rewriting, I republished them under his name, which was Alan, A-L-A-N, Hynd, instead of my own name. So those are on Amazon in digital format. And at some point I'm going to turn them into trade paperback because as we've discussed recently, there's a lot of people who just like books. That would include me. We all spend so much time in front of a computer screen these days that going and reading something in a trade paperback is kind of like a vacation. So that's the story on that.
Your posting, another one of your postings on Facebook this week reveals that paperbacks, you have a paperback book on the Polo Grounds on Ebbets Field, the last game at Ebbets Field. And not that it's any of our business, but the paperbacks are selling more than the e-books. Am I correct?
Yeah, that is correct.
That's very, very enthusiastic. I'm enthused by that, given that I was under the impression that fewer and fewer people were buying.
That started to turn last year.
Oh.
No knows. Maybe people had to go to opticians and optometrists because their eyes were, from reading e-books. I never even tried that. I have no interest in doing that. Yeah.
I think what goes on with the baseball books, both my baseball titles, the Giants of the Polo Grounds and the final game at Ebbets Field, both of those are selling proportionately higher percentages in paper than they are in e-books. And I think one reason is that a lot of people who like to read about baseball like to maintain a library of their baseball books.
Absolutely, yes.
And then you combine that with the fact that a good number of the people who read about the history of baseball are, let's say, over 40. So you get a situation where people are just predisposed to buy the book. And if you can price one, as I did with the Dodgers book, at $14.95, that's a pretty good deal. It's hard to get a decent book for that price anymore. So it becomes an item that's going to sell reasonably well.
Absolutely. Hey, thank you for a tour of how things are done in the book business. I appreciate that.
I could go on and on.
And we will. How about that? These shows are just the beginning. We're gonna do it for a long time. Okay, guys, let's talk today about the owners of the three clubs back in the day, back in the 50s when baseball was in its golden age, and we were just 10, 11-year-old kids, 12 years old, and soaking it all up. So, Alan, start with you. Dan Topping.
Well, it's Dan Topping and Del Webb. Well, in 1946, the estate of Jacob Rupert, who passed away in 1939, still owned the Yankees, and they were looking to get rid of it. So it was a consortium of Del Webb, who was a very successful businessman at construction, Dan Topping, who was a multimillionaire through his father's business, and Larry McPhail, who previously had run the Reds and the Dodgers, and as Leo DeRocha said about him, he was an alcoholic, and says there was a thin line between genius and insanity, and Larry McPhail walked over and back on that line quite a bit. When he was drunk, he was insane, and when he was sober, he was he was very, very smart. So they bought the team in 1946. And after 1947, when they won the World Series in 7 games against the Dodgers, McPhail got up there and was supposed to be a victory party. He said, "I quit." So Topping and Webb bought him out. And then Topping and Webb owned the Yankees until they sold the team to CBS in 1964. Now, they left their hands. They hired George Weiss as general manager to run the baseball operations end of it. Topping and Webb both tremendously influenced the American League, and there were people who believed that they ran the American League for a long time. They sold Yankee Stadium in 1955, I think it was, or 56, to a man in Kansas City named Arnold Johnson. So it had to be before that. It had to be like 1953 or 4, I'm sorry. And when the Mack family got out of Kansas City, they had moved there from Philadelphia in 1955. Arnold Johnson bought the team under Del Webb's. He was a business partner of Del Webb's, and bought the team with American League approval, except for a couple of franchises. And the Yankees basically ran the A's as a farm team, Major League farm team, until Charlie Finley bought them from Johnson after Johnson had passed away in 1961. So Webb and Topping, Webb especially, ran the business of the American League. And during their tenure as Yankee owners, they won 15 pennants in 18 years. So they it was through Bucky Harris, the first one, Casey Stengel from 49 through 60, and Ralph Tyko after that. But they made an awful lot of money from the team, but their ownership was regarded as basically anti-black because it took until 1955 with Elston Howard to break the color barrier there. And what's really significant to me is that after the Dodgers and Giants left and the Yankees were a monopoly in the city, that their attendance did not shoot up tremendously. In fact, in 1961, with the team won 109 games and the whole Mantle-Maris chase of Babe Ruth's home run record, they drew 1,747,000, of which I was 4. But on the whole, they were very successful ownership. But they did certain things that made them people turn off to them. And somebody came out with I forget who it was, but came out with a statement during their time of ownership that rooting for the Yankees is like rooting for United States Steel.
Yes, U.S. Steel.
Yeah, and they sold it to CBS in 64. And also what happens when a franchise is sold, the first thing that goes is, or the owners decide to sell, the first thing that goes is player development. So when they got rid of the Yankees, they were a shell of their former selves when all the stars, Mantle, Maris, Ford, Howard, they all got old. There was basically nobody to replace them. So the team declined very quickly after they left.
Gibbs. They put a lot of money into Jake Gibbs and
they had Mel Stottlemyre and Thurmond. I mean, there were a couple of exceptions, but it wasn't the feeder the way it was when Webb and Topping really had control in the late 40s and the 50s.
Did Webb and Topping get along?
Apparently, yeah.
It was a good relationship.
Yeah, Topping just let Webb make the decisions of the baseball operations, and he gave it to George Weiss, who I once described as he would have made a great commander of a death camp in World War II.
Yeah, right on
the players all hated him. The players all hated him.
Let me throw a question back at Alan. Why did the Kansas City management, Arnold Johnson, that was the right first name, right? Why did they operate that way? I mean, it was very obvious.
Yeah, he was a business partner of and a lot of things with Del Webb, and I think Beck wasn't around. I think there were 1 or 2 votes against approving Arnold Johnson, knowing the whole thing. But as I said, the Topping a Webb around the American League is their own private fiefdom. So everything they
it was kind of an open secret. The A's were a farm system.
And Frank Lane, who was a general manager for a number of teams, was very, very controversial. And when he traded in Cleveland, when he traded Maris in 1958 to the Kansas City A's, he said, I know I'm sending him on a one-stop trip to New York, but I needed the Vic Power and Woody Held for my team. So he made the trade, and after the Yankees had their worst year under Stengel in 1959, guess who was coming to New York? And the Yankees gave up Don Larson, who had fallen back to his losing ways, Marv Throneberry, who later would become the symbol of the early Mets, Hank Bauer, who was 37 years old and wanted to go home, and What the heck was the fourth one? They traded this to somebody else in that trade.
Jerry Lumpy, maybe?
No, that was later. No, Seaburn. Norm Seaburn, because Stengel didn't like him after he dropped misplayed a number of fly balls in the 1958 World Series with that Sunfield. Seaburn would go on to be a pretty good player.
The trade has been really criticized, and rightfully so, but think about it for a second. Seaburn and Lumpy were all-stars.
Lumpy was not in that trade. Lumpy was the next year when they traded him and two of their former starters, Johnny Cox and Tom Servant, who had bad arms, for Hector Lopez. And Ralph Terry, who was coming back after being farmed out there, basically.
Hector Lopez was underrated. If he wasn't given that nickname of Hector What a Pair of Hands Lopez when he was filling in for a guy you couldn't fill in for at third, Clete Boyer. And he didn't do that badly, but anything by comparison to Boyer was...
He was considered a butcher in the field. Lopez,
true.
But he wasn't that bad.
He
hung around for
I think the nickname
quite a while.
The nickname added to it.
Yeah,
he was versatile. He could play left.
If they wanted to get rid of him, they could have done that, in the same year, like they did with Suitcase Simpson, who came over in the Billy Martin trade, and Stengel didn't like him. They sent him back to the A's the following season.
Well, I think too that there's a Spanish community in New York that didn't mind rooting for Hector Lopez.
No.
So,
but this was it. O'Malley basically Walter O'Malley basically ran the National League, and Topping and Webb ran the American League.
Okay.
And in fact, there was
one quick thing about Lopez. He platooned with Yogi Berra on what could have been arguably the best Yankee team ever.
1961. One more thing about Webb and Topping. They absolutely hated Bill Veeck.
It was mutual, too.
Yeah, I know. And when Bill Veeck wanted to move the Browns out of St. Louis in 1950, after 1953, first of all, they vetoed Veeck tried to move the Browns to Milwaukee before the Braves moved there. And they said, we'll let the Topping Webb said, we'll let the franchise go to Baltimore if you sell out. And he sold out, and they let the team move to Baltimore.
Then he bought the White Sox.
Yeah. They backdoored that because the Yankees still had the same owners.
How did he backdoor it?
He was in a partnership, and he let a couple of the other partners carry the ball.
Okay. All right.
But what they did to him after 1953. He needed shares of television revenue and whatever, and Yankees made sure when the schedule came out that the Browns were never here on a weekend, that they were here during the week when that the attendance was less.
Yeah,
they really hated Veeck that much, and Veeck writes and Veeck is in rec. He writes quite a bit on this.
Yes, I remember that. I've read the book years ago, but it was one of the first books I ever read that really started to talk about
the business.
The business. Yeah. What went on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember him talking about. That was the Hustler's Handbook written after.
Yeah,
that.
Both Topping and Webb were publicity shy. So as long as they kept it quiet, they could do this kind of stuff.
All right. Let's talk about Stoneham and O'Malley. You're the expert, Noel. How did they get along, those two, competing in the National League, competing in the same city? Was there mutual respect? Was there an animosity? You tell me.
That's a good question. I can't remember in my various research of the two books I've written on the franchises, I can't remember there being a lot of animosity, but they sure didn't mind tweaking each other. Again, Alan might know more about this than I do, but there was obviously the rivalry, but I'm not sure that it ever got to be nasty the way it got nasty sometimes between the Dodgers and the Yankees. Maybe it was because I don't really know the answer to that about why it didn't get that way. Maybe everybody was making money, so everybody was happy. Again, there weren't that many years when the actual ownership intersected because O'Malley didn't gain full control of the Dodgers until I guess what would it have been, the late 40s, Alan?
No, 1951 was his first year. Because Ricky went to Pittsburgh, was in Brooklyn in 1950, went to Pittsburgh in 1951.
So there were really only about 6 years, and for maybe about half of those years, O'Malley was kind of figuring a way to get out of Brooklyn, and Stoneham was basically his ticket to get out, because if he could talk another owner into going to the West Coast, then O'Malley could go to Los Angeles. So, there was Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, you've referred to that and the move before. It was my understanding, and maybe Alan can chip in on this, that the Giants, Stoneham and the Giants, were as good as gone to Minneapolis.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the new ballpark there that the Twins went into their first year that lasted for a decade or so was built for the Giants. And then,
but the thing is, though, one could look back and say they were as good as gone, but they were still staggering along in sixth place in 1956 and 1957 in New York. So they had
made a deal with Minneapolis. They were going, not when I say good as gone, I remember I had a T-shirt that I wore to the Y in Flushing, and I was 10, and it said Minneapolis Giants on it. They were gone. So my point is that when O'Malley was going to move to L.A., he ended up talking Stoneham out of going to Minneapolis, so that when the move was made, teams could fly in and play two teams on one trip. It became economically feasible that way, and O'Malley put it together. But he gets the dubious credit in quotation marks for bringing the Giant, or taking the Giants as well as the Dodgers out of New York. It wasn't the case. They were individual deals, and
how then did Stoneham get out of the deal to Minneapolis if it was a done deal?
Because
I'll tell you how it was done.
Yeah.
It was done by O'Malley claiming territorial rights to St. Paul. He queered the deal because he had a minor league AAA team in St. Paul, and again, the Twins right across the.
The Twins didn't go there till 1961.
No, but I mean.
They had the Minneapolis Millers.
The name
there.
of the Twins is.
They had the Minneapolis Millers, who were in the American Association along with St. Paul. They were bitter rivals.
Right.
On that level.
To the best of my knowledge, O'Malley queered the deal with Minneapolis that Stoneham was going to go, and it left Stoneham with no choice but as the franchise was screwed up in San Francisco because of the albatross of Candlestick Park and the wind dungeon that they played in. Once they finally got, and it's been like 20 years now, time goes by, AT&T Park or whatever they call it, Pac-Bell, that is a gem. If you guys haven't seen that park,
no.
It is absolutely marvelous. Inside and out, the view from within, the view from without, unbelievable. And it finally came to fruition where the Giants got their due in San Francisco, and they went on to win 3 in a row, all that stuff. But it took years, and anyway, that's. I wanted to clear that up about the move, that the Giants were out of New York. There was just no way. The city wasn't helping them with any sort of refurbishment of the ballpark. The neighborhood was crumbling, and I just still rue the day when both of those teams left. It broke the spirit of New York. Noel, you can speak to that better than I can. Am I right about that?
You're absolutely right. Not only did it break the spirit, but people got finally. It was sort of like being jilted by somebody you really loved. That the attendance just fell through the floor at the end of the season. Very few people even wanted to go out and take a final look. If you look at some of the attendances in September of those years, people were angry, they were frustrated, and it was sort of like, a breakup in which, you finally said, okay, if you're going to leave, get out of here. I don't even want to see you anymore. And that manifested itself quite a bit at the final game at the Polo Grounds, when you had an angry mob chasing the players to the clubhouse. But people just gave up on the teams, and it was really kind of sad. And I was, again, quite young at the time, but people had this attitude in the city that things were beyond control. What could you do? Crime was increasing, neighborhoods were deteriorating, people were moving out. It was kind of a low point, I think, for the city. So, the teams moving really kind of just put the exclamation point on it. There was also, among some people, almost a feeling of disbelief that, okay, they're moving, the season is over in 1957, and really, they're really not going to be here next spring? I mean, some people they could believe it intellectually, but they couldn't believe it emotionally and physically. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say.
There's still some people who are big-time Dodger fans who I've met that still can't deal with this. I mean, it's been 62 years. I mean, if I told one guy, after a Brooklyn Dodger documentary was shown on HBO, I told him, Bob, I said, it's been 60 years. They're not coming back. Get over it. And basically, Ralph, you just saw that with the Oakland Raiders football team, that they were booing the hell out of them if they blew the game. Apparently it was their last game in Oakland.
It was, and it's the second time it was the last game in Oakland.
Yeah.
They moved once before. You talk about being jilted.
They moved to L.A., and then in 1983, they moved back in 1995. Yeah.
And not only did they move back, but when they moved back, they converted the Oakland Coliseum into a football stadium.
Yeah, which pissed the A's off. Yeah.
Oh, it ruined the ambiance of that stadium. They had a beautiful view, an open view in center field, much like the Kansas City ballpark. It was doable. It was, it was cookie cutter and still is, and needs replacing, but nothing screwed it up more than that monstrosity of a wall in dead center field, and then they end up moving again. You talk about a city that the powers that be in the city have always had a poor relationship with their sports franchise. For sports franchises, they, like many cities and many people, they undervalue the importance of having big league franchises and what it means to the city, the pride in the city, the building up of businesses around the stadium. It's been horrible in the East Bay, and this time they ain't coming back. So, as like you told your friend about the Dodgers, ain't coming back. No question.
I think I know the answer to this, but where are they going again? They're going to
Las Vegas.
Las Vegas? Is
Yeah.
the stadium ready for them there?
Apparently, yeah.
Okay.
And the other brilliant move was that the Chargers moved out of San Diego because they wouldn't build them vote to be taxed to build a new stadium for the football team there, Chargers. So they moved to L.A. They're waiting for this mausoleum in L.A. to get built next year or two, and the Rams and the Chargers are both going to be there. But the Chargers right now are playing in a dump that seats about 30,000. And if they think a lot of these fans that they had in San Diego are going to make the trip up there, they're nuts. The Chargers will always play second fiddle to the Rams up there. Always. So, I mean, some of these moves are really, really stupid. But getting back to the Dodgers and Giants, I think the only major interaction they had, when Branch Rickey was still there, was Leo DeRocha leaving the Dodgers to manage the Giants. And from what I've read, I was only 5 years old when that happened. It was the biggest story in the city for quite a while. Right. The story was that Stone was looking to get rid of Melat because, Melat and Bill Terry managed them for 15 years. And he asked Rickey if he could talk to Bert Schotten, who managed the Dodgers in 1947. He said, Schotten, you can have DeRocha. And Stone jumped at the chance, and DeRocha, who had been the biggest enemy of Giant fans for years, went over from Brooklyn to the Giants.
Seeing him in a Giant uniform just shocked a lot of people. It wasn't.
And Jackie Robinson turned that down when they tried to trade him to the Giants after 1956. He retired.
I think he had a deal set up with John Full of Nuts.
Yeah. And he was 37 years old at that point. And his skills had deteriorated the last year he played, yeah.
Remember Look in Life, how you get subscriptions in those days? Look was a periodical.
I'm sorry to say, I didn't mean Post also. My parents used to get that, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. Anything you can add to either of the personalities of Stoneham and O'Malley that we don't know about?
Well, Harold Parrott, who was the secretary, who was a Dodger official for years, wrote a book years ago called The Lords of Baseball. And he told a story about Walter O'Malley, that the Dodgers went to Japan after 1955. No, I'm sorry, after 1956. And O'Malley had a friend who was very sick, and he wanted to go on the trip as a last wishes, whatever it was. And O'Malley said no. And they asked him why. He said no. The Rise and says, do you know how much it would cost to ship a body back from Japan?
Oh.
He actually said that, yeah.
To a friend.
For a friend,
what
yeah.
He would say to an enemy.
Yeah, that's what he actually said. This has been written about in several places. I'm not making this up.
No.
And, and that's when they realized how money was O'Malley's interest. The other thing O'Malley did was the Dodgers in 1957. They had controlled Fort Worth. They had a Double-A farm team there. Phil Wrigley, who owned the Cubs, controlled the rights to Los Angeles. Okay, he had the Los Angeles Angels. He had a farm team there. The place was called Wrigley Field, out in L.A., the stadium. And O'Malley convinced Wrigley to trade the rights, trading the rights to Fort Worth to the rights to L.A. Somehow he did this, and this was an incredible steal.
Yeah. Wrigley didn't have the foresight to look.
No.
Yeah.
The only thing Wrigley did. One more comment. The only thing Wrigley did was bring in the College of Coaches, which was running for the dumbest idea in Major League history.
Yeah.
Elvin Tappy.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of them. Yeah.
A whole bunch of, but he's the one I remember. Elvin Tappy had a brother. I remember.
Brother Melvin.
Melvin.
Yeah.
Tappy from baseball cards.
And somebody posted a picture of a man named on Facebook, a man named Goldie Holt, who was one of the College of Coaches, and I remember the name. I put down that this is in the running for the dumbest idea in Major League history. So anyway, let's go back to Noel.
I don't know. I thought that the idea of coaches that were in touch with the minor league system and could follow these guys, I don't think the idea of the coaches rotating is a bad one. I think you got to have a manager, but if you rotate coaches through the system,
that wasn't the rotating coaches as to manage the team, which when Lou Brock was traded to the Cardinals, and he was a sensation there. I asked Dick Rowe about this in 1985. He said we thought we got the worst of the deal, and then Brock told the team how crazy it was over in Chicago with the College of Coaches. He said he felt like he got out of prison there.
You can imagine.
Well, he was pretty close to correct.
I'm going to ask you the same question as I asked Alan. Is there anything in your writing that you found out about either of those two owners, O'Malley or Stoneham, that surprised you, that anything interesting that we may glean?
Well, in talking to a lot of, I'll be honest, I always had kind of a low opinion of Stoneham. Basically, he inherited the team. I didn't find that his ownership of the team, the success of the team kind of happened almost in spite of him. I know when DeRocher came in, DeRocher basically said, all these guys you like, they're just not going to be winning players for you. The famous phrase that DeRocher used was back up a truck, meaning get these guys out of here, let me bring my own players in. I guess you can give Stoneham credit for letting DeRocher rebuild a club in his own image, which won in 51 and 54. But one thing that I've come across a lot over the years in talking to people is many of the players liked Stoneham. They did not mind playing for him, as has been mentioned earlier in this podcast. There was management the players absolutely hated. I didn't find it that much with Stoneham. And the final footnote is, I know his family is continuing to campaign that Horace should be in the Hall of Fame.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, that one I never heard. Yeah.
Well,
and
if Bowie
they,
Kuhn is in the Hall of Fame, Horace should be in the Hall of Fame.
Well,
not that either of them necessarily should be, but
that's another topic. Yeah.
Right.
And the argument is O'Malley is why is O'Malley in the Hall of Fame? The theory is O'Malley brought baseball to the West Coast. Well, the Giants came along. You could say the Giants facilitated O'Malley to go to the West Coast, so hence Stoneham should be in also. I find the logic of that a little weird, but fortunately for everybody, I don't make those decisions. But I know this is an ongoing thing. He has some charming relatives who know a lot of people in baseball, and they keep pushing for it. So we will see. I mean, I have a feeling that if it was up to the three of us to vote whether Stoneham should be in the Hall of Fame, we would all vote the same way, and he would not be in. But that's just my guess. I haven't canvassed the two of you, but judging from your reaction,
O'Malley shouldn't be anywhere near the Hall of
Fame.
Oh,
look, they lowered the bar there, like they lowered the bar for commissioners with Bowie Kuhn. They lowered the bar with owners with Tom Yawk.
Yeah.
Who has absolutely no business. He was a racist. His teams never won a damn thing, and I think the story is he bought his way in there. It took them forever to put Jacob Rupert, who built Yankee Stadium and was the owner that built the Yankees into a powerhouse. It took them 80 years to put him in.
Do you think Steinbrenner should be in?
No.
I think you can make a case for it.
You can make a case for it, but he got suspended twice.
Oh, I know. But there are a lot of people who either as players or managers were suspended and were involved in some pretty unsavory things over the course of their career.
Be interesting to see what happened with when A-Rod is eligible. Yeah, that'd be interesting.
That will be interesting. And if you only need 75%, I wouldn't be surprised if A-Rod got in after a year or two.
Yeah,
and he's done a lot on television to sort of present himself as A-Rod light, as a more likable individual.
Yeah.
So he's got that going for him. I don't think any of the three of us will live to see Pete Rose get in. I'll tell you that.
No.
Well, I think Barry Bonds and Clemens need to be in at this point.
I don't want to start with that. We can talk about we can talk about that for another hour.
Okay.
Well, maybe we should. Maybe we should. Ralph, I'm sure you noticed that as soon as you said that, there was a deafening silence coming from the other end of these telephone lines.
Oh yeah. But as Peter Golenbach says, 85 to 90% of the players that they played with were doing PEDs.
How does he know?
How does he know for sure?
Yeah. Clemens was mediocre when he left Boston. His last 3 years with the Red Sox were they were mediocre. He goes to Toronto, runs into Jose Canseco there, and the usage started. Barry Bonds was jealous of McGuire and Sosa getting all the publicity. And if you look at pictures of Barry Bonds when he came with the Pirates in 1986 and what he was with the Giants later on, you see a tremendous difference.
If he didn't touch steroids,
he probably would have made it without that.
He would have made the Hall of Fame.
Without that, yeah. Okay, but he did. And you take a look at Lenny Dykstra with the Mets in 1986, then you look at him with the Phillies in 1993, and he's twice the size.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, no question.
But 85, 90%, I don't believe that.
All right, but the Hall of Fame should recognize these players with not an asterisk, but a notation on their plaque that the statistics that you're reading or as a result of the era that they played in or whatever. But I say Rose and what's his name, the guy who bet from
Shoeless Joe Jackson.
Shoeless Joe Jackson. They should be in, for crying out loud.
I've changed my position on Rose. I was adamant for years, but then when the MLB hooked up with DraftKings and other betting sites, that they're condoning this now, that they should let Pete Rose smell the roses when they're not vote him in when he's still around.
Well, they hated DeRocher. The baseball establishment hated DeRocher. Yeah. They didn't invite or induct him until after he died.
Yeah, well, right. Pete Rose probably would have gotten a pardon if he didn't stonewall all those years.
Oh,
that's probably true.
But then again, you could say, well, that's part of the disease. Denial and covering it up and what have you. But there's two schools of thought too, where his records as a result of longevity and should be diminished, or is longevity an asset when you're voting for a guy in the Hall of Fame?
Well, look, it's obvious when the Reds made him play a manager. He was coming off a couple of bad seasons, and they made him play a manager, and you knew he was going to play himself, until he got the hit record,
Right. But I'm sure the Reds wanted that as well.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
All right, guys. This has been, as usual, tremendously informative for me, and that I know that transcends. If I have an interest in something, there are people out there that reflect my interests. So I'm delighted that we're doing this. Thank you for bringing me back to when I was a kid, and it's a pleasure for me. Thank you, Noel. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you. We were all kids back then.
Yes. And, deep down in our hearts, we're little boys to this day.
Oh yeah.
So let's never lose that. And, keep smiling and keep being well, gentlemen.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Enjoy the holidays.
Okay. You too.
See you next week. Thank you, Dora.
Okay.
Next week it
Bye-bye.
is. Thank you for listening, everybody. Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. I'm Ralph Tyko, the weak link of it all. Got Alan Blumkin and Noel Hynd. Whoa, all-star team. See you next week.
Thank you, Ralph. Take care. Bye.
The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.